And we're live with the Brother Side podcast. Wow, we haven't done this for a while. I'm Alex.
I'm Justin.
And today we have Dr. John Hallgren of Mission Direct Primary Care. How's it going, John?
Good, thanks. How are you, Alex?
Good.
Justin,
Doing
good
well.
to meet you today, too.
What's that?
Good to meet you today,
Yeah,
too.
yeah, it was great to meet you.
So, John, you're from Texas. Are you a Texas fan or are you a Nebraska fan now?
For college teams?
Yeah.
No, I'm a Nebraska fan, actually.
Are you?
My dad was born and raised in Bellevue.
Okay.
And both my parents went to Lincoln. And so I was raised as a Cornhusker fan.
Okay. We like to hear that
yeah,
because
and-
we hate Texas, right?
Yeah.
So you're talking about the University of Texas at Austin.
Right.
And their athletic programs. I'm with you.
Yeah, okay. They're easy to hate.
I grew up in Fort Worth, so the hometown team in Fort Worth is TCU Horned Frogs.
Okay.
Uh-huh.
And so I'm a big Horned Frogs fan. My brother went there, and my mom lives right close to the school, but definitely not a UT fan.
Good.
Okay.
Good to
Yeah.
hear.
Yeah.
And you were in the Air Force.
Long time, yeah. I joined when I was 3 days after my 18th birthday, and
Okay.
went to the Air Force Academy. Was in 30 years to the day,
Wow.
and retired out of Offutt in 2017. So 1987 to 2017.
Thank you for your service
Yeah,
and
thank
happy
you.
belated Veterans Day.
Well, thanks. I
Yeah.
appreciate it.
Was that
And,
last week?
Yeah,
last
Wednesday.
Wednesday.
Okay.
So thanks, I appreciate it, and it's I always say thank you right back because without the support of our citizenry, honestly, we wouldn't have much of a military, and there's been times when people weren't so thankful about
Sure.
what we do. And I was very fortunate in my career; I didn't have to sacrifice much in terms of personal safety or that kind of thing. But
Sure.
Yeah.
you do have to go where they go, tell you to go, and do what they tell you.
Yeah,
to do.
when you signed up, though, you didn't know that.
Correct. Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
what you were getting yourself into.
Yeah,
Anything
yeah.
could have happened.
Yeah. Absolutely.
What are some of the most rewarding experiences of being in the Air Force? Or what are some of the coolest things that you've witnessed?
I mean, everybody will say this, but to me, the coolest thing about being in the Air Force is just the tremendous camaraderie that develops with people in your career field and people outside your career field too. I went to the Air Force Academy, so I had lots of friends who I got to see over the careers who were in flying jets and doing a lot of other things. And for the long term, that's always the most rewarding.
Sure.
Eventually. Saying we didn't have to sacrifice much. We were in Germany for one assignment, which was a fantastic assignment, but that was when September 11th happened.
Yeah.
Okay.
But right before that, in October of 2000, you probably remember the USS Cole bombing.
Yep. I was going to bring that up.
Yeah. So, if there's a single event that I thought was just, I joined up to do a certain thing, and that was to be a physician in the Air Force, and to then be put in a place where you had to show up and perform at your best is kind of cool, even though it's awful that event happened. To be able to show up and do your job. You're a firefighter, so
I'm
must know the
totally
feeling.
vibing with you on that one big time.
So anyway, the USS Cole occurred, and the casualties were in the ship and were treated in the ship, and then were evacuated to Djibouti and a little bit in Yemen. But immediately, so Launchstool is where I was stationed, and we're the closest hospital, American hospital, that can handle combat casualties. So that came to us. They spun up a big team to greet the folks who came back. There were some that were still critically ill, and they got sent straight to the intensive care unit. And then there's a team of us who basically re-triaged a big cohort of the sailors who made it back.
How many casualties were in that? Wasn't it teens?
It was 30, almost 40 significant casualties. 17 died.
Because there's a suicide bombing, right?
Yep.
Yeah, they were in the harbor in Aden, Yemen, refueling, and ship, just a little rubber dinghy came up with a bunch of explosives on the side and blew it up.
Jeez.
I did some Wikipedia research on it today because I remember it, but I didn't remember any details about it. And it was like hundreds of pounds of C4 on that boat.
Yeah, it blew a huge hole in the ship. It's amazing to me that the ship survived.
So you're basically a first responder as soon as that went down.
Sort of. I mean, a lot of the work we did was first responders. We were not the first there. Obviously, the medics on board the ship, and the ships have a pretty robust buddy aid type thing. And then some have been seen elsewhere. So hospitals in Djibouti and Yemen, but they got back to us. But we were still identifying people with significant injuries. I saw a guy, and he was standing there. He was looking really stoic. And I just said, "This guy's hurting. he's tough up, but you can tell he's hurting. So I went over and talked to him and examined him and found some concerning things. And so we did some x-rays, and sure enough, he had a fractured scapula and a collapsed lung.
Jeez.
And he was just sitting there toughing it out. And
Jeez.
so it kind of just, it was a really cool thing to be able to respond to and still find out that you're helping these guys with serious trauma injuries.
And how old were you at this time?
Had I turned 30? Yeah, not quite.
Okay, so you weren't like young 20s responding to this.
No,
That would have been pretty chaotic.
Yeah, and it wasn't a chaotic experience. We had a controlled entry into the hospital, so it's not like we were showing up right after the blast on the ship. It was just amazing to me that there was still a lot of stuff to be done and a lot of treatment to recognize and be done. So that was really cool. And then short on the heels, the reason a lot of people don't remember the Cole bombing was because it was just not very many months later, that less than a year, that we had September 11th, and it kind of got subsumed in that. But so after September 11th, we started operations in Afghanistan. And then our job was kind of similar, and we learned a lot from the Cole, believe it or not, just that one night. But we had to figure out how to re-triage casualties from Afghanistan. So we would just have these big planes show up with lots of injured people.
Right.
And
Was the military personnel just amped up after 9/11, just like balls to the wall, like we're going to get these guys? What was the mood?
yeah, there was for sure, and it happened pretty quickly. So it was 6 weeks maybe that we started. You started hearing that we were heading into Afghanistan.
Yeah.
So it was, the response was quick. And
Yeah.
So there wasn't a lot of waiting around, twiddling thumbs and getting too crazy amped up.
How long were you stationed over there for?
I was in Germany for 3 years.
Okay. Wow.
So
Do you speak German?
I do not. I'm on there.
You can drink
Hefeweizen
Hefeweizen, yeah.
You can drink the beer.
Warsteiner.
Yeah, it's such a big American community. There's like 100,000 Americans there.
Yeah, it's a huge
And
base.
so the Germans have adapted to us, and there's a bunch of us running around. So I did try to speak a little bit, and very quickly
failed
they
miserably?
They would stop you like, okay, thank you.
Thanks for trying.
Very polite of you.
Yeah.
Shut
Just
up, let me
stop.
speak English to you now.
Yeah. What other countries have you been stationed in?
Stationed, we were also in England for 3 years. That was a gem of an assignment. That was an easy assignment.
What
Shouldn't
was
say
the
easy.
assignment?
So I was a doc up in northern England. We were at this little tiny base, basically an NSA spy base, where they do a lot of listening. They have a lot of big radomes and
Okay.
collect a lot of intel that they interpret. And so it was a sleepy little clinic, and it was a real gem of a job.
Yeah.
Just dealing with like sniffles of guys.
Yeah,
and
yeah,
stuff
I mean,
like
we
that.
didn't- we
There
didn't
wasn't a
handle-
lot of
Jimmy's got the
triaging
cold.
of anybody.
Yeah, there was not any combat casualties. I was
No.
not delivering babies. Was not admitting to the hospital. So
Yeah.
it was a nice time. It was a fun time of life with our kids. They were late elementary school, so they were old enough you could do a lot with them.
Sure.
And still young enough that they wanted to hang out with you. So that was fun.
How privy were you to like intel? Like
Not at all.
not like you
No.
were just so far out of the loop on
I
that
was-
part.
Yeah, both by intent and even just me being fairly oblivious. So I think let's go to another question. I'll see if I can answer. I can share this story. I think I can.
Oh yeah, it's been cleared.
So
It's been cleared by the brother side.
Brother said.
There are not just the military. So the base had been there for a long time, and it's mostly NSA, National Security Administration folks. But there are lots of organizations that were there, and then lots of stuff was top secret. So I knew this one guy who was active duty, and he came in and just had seen him around. His wife came in to see me just for a physical and for a company physical, which is kind of odd. Not many people could work outside, but it was a company physical, and there was
Yeah.
no letterhead on top, and it was just this physical. And so I'm filling it out. I was just trying to make conversation. And
Small talk.
so what are you going to be doing? And she said, oh, I just need this filled out. And, oh, what are you going to be doing? Oh, I just need this filled out. I said, well, seriously, just so I know if I'm adjudicating your fitness for work. And she said, think of the base you're at, and think of the fact there's no identification on the papers, and maybe you can figure it out.
Mm-hmm.
So I finally figured it out and said, oh, I get it. So,
A spy, right?
I
You can't
You
say.
can't say.
I can't say.
But we haven't mentioned names.
No.
So-
No, can't mention
Yeah. Well, how long
They're
ago was
listening
that?
in right now.
it. It was a long time ago.
Yeah.
Yeah. I doubt that they're following you around listening to you right now. They could be.
I wouldn't be too sure.
John
Yeah.
Hallgren.
It's on the brother side talking about our
I
secrets.
knew we shouldn't have let him on the brother side. God.
So in the Air Force, is it a requirement to get up in a jet?
No, there's actually no requirement. A lot of people don't. I was really lucky. So I went to the Air Force Academy for school.
Uh-huh.
And your intention was to be a physician?
No, well, I didn't really know, actually.
Okay.
My dad was a pilot. My dad was a career pilot in the Air Force.
Okay.
And I went to the academy with the intention of maybe being a pilot, maybe being a physician. And I really didn't decide until kind of late in my senior year which I was going to do.
Okay.
Why did you decide physician over pilot?
The Air Force does a lot of strange things with personnel decisions. And in my class, when we graduated, they decided they had an overage of pilots.
Okay.
And they made a decision with our class that they were going to do what they called a bank. So they were going to send us all the pilot training. All the pilot qualified people will go to pilot training. And then they would send you to non-flying jobs. And then they said they would bring you back when it was time. And I was like, well, okay. And both my grandfather was also a career Air Force officer. And I said, what do you think? And they're like, if the Air Force needs you, they will bring you back. And if they don't need you, they won't bring you back. So, if the pilot overage continues, you won't come back.
Wow.
Okay. So you would go to pilot training and then never be an actual pilot. Turns out
That'd
it
be
was
hard.
wildly misassessed by the Air Force personnel system. And not too long after that, they had a big pilot shortage.
Nice.
But honestly,
that
I think,
one.
yeah, right. I think my heart was more towards doing medicine. And so I had done my major was designed for that, and I had applied to medical school. And so when I got in January, I said, I think I'm going to do this. And so I ended up being a doc.
Tom Cruise's Maverick from Top Gun didn't inspire you to want to get
Not
up in the
enough
jet?
to go against the medical side.
Yeah. Okay.
He was too afraid to be Goose. Just didn't want to be Goose.
Nobody wants to be
Yeah.
Goose for obvious reasons.
Yeah, I don't know. I think if the pilot bank hadn't occurred, I probably still would have gone to medical school, but I don't know.
Yeah. Well,
But I spent the first 2 years of medical school thinking I'd made the worst mistake of my life, because I was talking to my friends and they were in pilot training and they were flying fast jets and they were, doing maneuvers and
Yeah,
There's
there's
no way I could
pilot
do
training is
that.
an intense time, and it's
sure.
it's fun. It's a big, it's a significant thing. So I felt like I was missing out.
sure.
yeah.
And then when I finally got into clinical rotations, third and fourth year, I was like, oh, okay, this is
Where I need to be.
I made the right
this is
decision.
good. Yeah.
Is that in Colorado Springs?
The Air Force Academy is in Colorado
Yeah.
Springs, yeah.
Okay.
And then I went to medical school at military medical school outside of D.C. in Bethesda, Maryland,
Okay.
right next to the National Naval Medical Center.
Nice.
Yeah.
Were you? Did you ever want to specialize in anything, like
So I did.
specifically? Or you did?
I did. So I specialized in family medicine, which is a 3-year residency.
Okay.
And that's a common thing people ask. So family medicine, it's general practice because we see all age ranges. We do a wide range of procedural stuff and what is often called cognitive medicine. So in terms of managing chronic diseases and figuring out people's problems.
Sure.
So that's a 3-year specialty, just like pediatrics, just like internal medicine.
Okay.
And so that is my specialty. Yeah.
Okay.
So.
And you were stationed at Offutt for some time, right?
Yeah, we got here in 2009. We came here from England, and I was residency director for the military down there. So the UNMC and the Air Force have a combined family medicine residency.
Okay.
And I was the military side program director, and was here. So I worked at UNMC. So I was attending physician up there. So I worked in the hospitals here and got somewhat integrated with the civilian side of medicine here.
Okay.
And then we were here for 8 years. I transitioned to command job, so I was the commander of the medical operations squadron down there. For the last 3 years I was here, and then retired.
Wow.
What would you say is the biggest difference between civilian and military medicine? Or like, is there a big difference like on how things are handled procedurally or anything like that?
Procedurally, in terms of how you administer
Right,
things,
yeah, just-
absolutely. So that's the difference. So the practice of medicine is not significantly different. The vast majority of physicians and other clinicians in the Air Force train in civilian institutions, just like any other doc. So the practice of medicine is not significantly
Sure,
different.
it's based on
The
science.
big difference is, so the military has to prepare for war and prepare all its clinicians for going and supporting combat operations. And then it's almost like a side job is taking care of garrison care and taking care of retirees, dependents,
Sure.
all that. And that does create a big disconnect. So often, and the priority has to be preparing for war because you can't get that wrong.
Right.
But it does put stress on the ability to, have the access and mainly access for dependent care. So that's a big difference because
Yeah.
in the civilian world, all you do is show up and see your patients.
Right.
We've got a lot of extra training, a lot of, training is most of it, and then deployments. And so it's just, it feels like the garrison side clinic can never really get in a good rhythm to
Yeah, I could see that.
be optimal for, the care that's delivered there, but it can be frustrating to access that care sometimes. So I'd say that's probably the biggest difference.
Yeah.
And the Air Force can solve a problem by just saying, shut up, you're going to go do this. And
Right.
because we said so.
Yeah. Yep, that's how it's going to be.
Is it true they do beta testing on some vaccines on military personnel?
No, not to any greater extent than they do
Normal
civilian
civilians.
personnel.
Okay.
Yeah. So they will recruit us. When I was a medical student, I volunteered to be guinea pig for the hepatitis A vaccine when it came out.
Okay.
But there was no forced. It was not like, hey, show
You
up
have
and
to
get
do
this
this.
experimental vaccine. No, they didn't. That
We own you.
You
they
will
do
take
own us,
this.
but they didn't do that. And that has happened in the more distant past, but
Yeah.
not in the recent history.
Did you when you're stationed in England? Did you find yourself picking up the accent at all?
No, I didn't.
Dang it.
I know, but the boys did. They're funny.
Did they? And being at school and stuff?
Yeah, this place was tiny, and it had a small school, but we lived a ways away out in just in a regular little town called Harrogate, and they went to a British primary school. So I've got several funny stories on that. But they did when they were in class. They were still young, and they would pick up the accent. So when the Brits were big on mental maths. So they would, just have these drills in class where you would have to do mental maths. So
Okay.
arithmetic and that kind of
Sure.
stuff. They were in primary school. But he would come home and kind of practice it. And if he was counting or doing his mental maths, he would flip into this Yorkshire accent. That, he would count in a Yorkshire accent. And then when he was done with that, when he was not thinking about his mental maths, he was back to talking normally. They picked up a lot of little phrases, and some of them still say it, so whilst instead of while. So just some little things like that they picked up.
Do you have an accent that you could give us? I know you didn't.
Yorkshire
didn't pick
accent?
it. Yeah. Give us your best.
I will
Best
try
version.
to imitate my son with his Yorkshire accent. Let's see if we can. But he would count mentally and say 12, 13, 14 Yorkshire accents.
Ah,
are
okay.
That's
totally
good.
different. He would talk like that. But then it was so funny because the brain works in such a funny way, because as soon as he was done with his mental maths, that would click off and he would talk normal, just like a regular American kid. It was pretty funny.
Yeah. it's
When
weird
we
how
were
that-
putting him in class, they wear uniforms, and you could wear short trousers or long trousers, which we would call pants or shorts.
Right.
Okay.
And we were talking to the headmistress and just, trying to help them fit in easily. What do the kids wear? And so we said, what kind of pants do they wear? And she kind of looked at us like that and said, well, we just need them to wear pants. So pants are underwear in England.
Pants or
Not-
underwear, you said?
Pants are underwear.
Okay.
So trousers. So they would wear their short trousers or their long trousers with pants underneath the trousers.
Ah.
So, hey,
Confusing.
we gotta chuckle out of it.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I would assume there'd be a lot of little things like subtleties like
Yes.
that would just take time to get used to.
Mm-hmm.
Alex and I are about as anti-cultured as it gets.
Oh man.
We're
Terrible.
so Nebraskans. I mean, we've visited other countries, but we have never lived anywhere else.
I mean,
So-
we go to like a Mexico all inclusive. It's like that's the extent. Everyone's speaking English
Yeah,
and
it's-
drinking.
yeah.
Basically, America South
Yeah.
on that little resort, It's not, yeah. So as far as culture, just not our forte.
No, we gotta venture out.
I know. We've said that forever.
Travel is a great educational experience. So I will say that.
If there's one place you could go right now, where would that be?
Assuming there's no COVID.
No COVID,
Yeah,
yeah.
you got
Yeah,
to.
if COVID was magically gone. We really like Puerto Rico. So it's a great tropical island.
Yep.
You feel like you're leaving the States because it's a different culture,
Right.
but you're still in the States, and so you don't need a passport, and travel's pretty easy there.
Sure.
It's not too far away. We've been there a couple times. It's really,
Yeah, that's
Really
true.
nice.
You wouldn't need a passport there. I never even thought of that.
yeah, you don't.
Even post hurricane. You
Still
think
no passport.
Well, no, I mean, like, is it still as devastated?
So
mean,
I don't
you've
know. We
there
haven't
since
been
then?
back since Maria went through. I know they're back open for tourism to the extent that they can be with the current pandemic.
Yeah.
So we're looking forward to going back at some point. So.
Are you tired of the word pandemic? I'm just like COVID, pandemic,
Yeah, I'm
the
more
Rona,
tired of the word COVID than pandemic, I
vids.
think.
the vids.
Yeah, it's just, I don't know.
You knew we had to bring it up because you're a doctor.
Oh, sure.
So we're there. We've
We've gotten to COVID.
We have.
We actually, honestly, I don't know what number of podcasts this is for us. We should say that this is podcast number whatever it is.
This
but
would be number 11.
11.
Yeah.
And we have talked about it pretty little, like
That's good.
very little
That's
so
good.
far.
It's good to take a break from talking about it, honestly.
But since you're here,
If I'm
break
here
it
and
over.
you want me to talk about it, I will talk about it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Where do we go from here? So cases in Douglas County and I think all of Nebraska, maybe just United States in general, are spiking quickly.
Yes.
Is that due to people not caring anymore? Is there something we're missing? What are your thoughts on that?
Is it something we're missing? So I will say, yes, people are getting tired of quarantines, self-isolation when they have symptoms, shutdowns of their businesses, shutdowns of the businesses they like to patronize. Everybody's tired of that.
Yep.
No question about it. And I do think the part of the spread is, yes, that. I also think a big part of the spread, or the increased number of cases we're seeing, is we are entering into fall and winter.
Yep.
And we're spending more time indoors, more time in more crowded scenarios indoors. So I
Sure.
think that is also a significant part of it.
Do you think a shutdown is imminent? Like it's going to happen?
No telling. I mean, I kind of think not, and at least in terms of shutting down like we did back in the spring. And I think Nebraska actually did a really good job of being measured in its responses, and I think continues to be measured in its responses, without just knocking everything down to nothing. Because I think that would be bad, and that has its own health consequences, frankly.
Sure. So the big question is the vaccine. So Pfizer came out and they got a 90 to 95% effective vaccine. What are your thoughts on the number of people that are actually going to take that vaccine? And if, say, 50% of people say, you know what, I'm not taking it, what does that look like? What's going to happen? We're still going to be chasing this thing, right?
Yes. I'm very hopeful. So I was one of the investigators for the Pfizer study.
Okay.
So we.
I'm sure you're about
No,
to
go
explain
ahead.
it. No, I was like, what's that mean? Being an investigator.
In actuality, there's not a whole lot. So I'm a sub-investigator at one of the 100+ clinical sites that they used. So I'm just there to supervise, make sure we're selecting patients appropriately, examining them to make sure that they're in a reasonable state of health to do this.
Kind of oversight.
Yeah, just clinical oversight to make sure we're proceeding safely. So it was interesting. I mean, the clinical work is not particularly difficult or a lot of decision making because we're all very protocol based. But it was exciting to be part of that.
Sure.
Yeah, absolutely.
So it was really encouraging to see those studies. So both Pfizer and Moderna now have been able to report, almost 95% efficacy. Now, it's important to understand that is shortly after the second dose. So there's 2 doses, one, and then you get one 3 weeks later.
Okay.
And they measured efficacy, basically a week after that first dose.
And that's the one that has to be refrigerated, right?
Yeah, both of those
Yeah.
have frozen, not just, and pretty deep freeze.
Very frozen
Yeah.
from the sounds of it.
So that will be a struggle for the logistical side of getting the vaccine out, but they'll work it out. So I think the vaccine will be a game changer, even if only 50% of people get it, which I hope is a gross underestimation. That will help tremendously. And so the other side of that is we don't know how long that efficacy is going to be. If it's even 6 months, that like the flu vaccine is basically, that'll be a huge thing and will allow us, I think, to get this under control. So if we see 90% or even 80, 75% efficacy, and it's 6 months durable, we'll be able to turn the tide.
Wow, that's
and it's so then it's a matter of how quickly can they get billions of doses of vaccines out, and that's going to be the rate limiter. So it's not going to be before Christmas, obviously.
Right.
It's going to be slowly over several months, a year even, to really be able to get the doses to vaccinate the most folks.
Yeah, Alex and I have talked about not taking the first round. Like, let's see how it goes.
Yeah.
Because it feels like it's being pushed, from a lot of different levels. But coming from somebody that's been there, seen it, seen it being tested, is there any reason to have that fear of, it being pushed and not going through the proper channels, tested?
No, so it's gone through the proper channels, and it was disappointing to see that kind of get bandied about in the election season. But so one good thing that has happened is they've really cleared the roadblocks that happen in bureaucracies like the FDA and said, we got to move this forward. So this has gone as fast as it can go clinically. And the great news is we really didn't have any bureaucratic hurdle slowdowns. It was just, can you get this out clinically?
Yeah. Right.
And we have not seen any safety problems other, it's been like any other vaccine. Yeah, you can get a sore arm. Yes, you can feel a little run down as your immune system is revving
maybe
up.
a third nipple. Like,
Weird
I will
growths.
get it.
We did have a few cases of third nipples. We think those are going to go away on their own. So don't worry.
Hopefully
about
with
it.
time
And,
and a salve.
right, time and a salve. A little steroid cream will take care of it for you. But we really just didn't see anything. And there's some weird stuff that can happen with vaccines. So there's weird neurological stuff that can happen, and the disease can react in a different way. But we have not seen that so far. And if you don't see it in the first 3 months, it's unlikely, not impossible to happen. So I think we're going to see really safe vaccines, safe as anything else that you get. And I would be first in line
Okay.
to get the vaccine.
Wow, that's super encouraging. I mean, I was just having this conversation like an hour before we came here and with some friends, and we had basically said, I don't want the first round,
So I'll put it out there. The first round has already occurred. They've already had 40,000 people vaccinated with both the Moderna and the Pfizer vaccine.
Through the testing process?
Through the test process.
Right.
So the first round's done.
Yeah, it's out there.
And, nobody died. Nobody had any crazy adverse reactions. So
That we know of. They wouldn't say if somebody died, would they?
yeah. So if you,
They probably have to report it.
I
Yeah.
pay attention to the papers, and they do report. So there were other vaccine studies that did have to shut down for some concerning events that proved not to be due to the vaccine. But when you're immunizing 40,000 people, somebody's going to get something bad happen, and then you've got to make sure that the vaccine wasn't involved in that.
Right.
Yeah.
But they did stop some trials, and they've stopped some therapeutic trials too for that same reason. So we just didn't see much. So I had COVID, so I maybe can delay my vaccine a little bit, but when my antibody titers go to zero, I'll be fighting to get in line to get it.
Was the U.S. one of the only countries really pushing to get a vaccine out? I haven't heard much.
Oh, no.
Oh, no, it's all
Yeah.
over.
Okay.
Yeah. So the Russians and Chinese have really tried.
Can we trust the Chinese to make a vaccine?
You can trust
That's
them.
one I would sit out on.
You can trust them to make the vaccine. I don't know if you can trust the vaccine. So I actually don't recall, but today I read that either Russia or China their vaccine is not showing to be particularly efficacious.
Okay.
So
Yeah, it was a couple months ago that Russia announced that they had something that was
Yep.
workable.
Yep.
And we're like, that sounds made up.
Two of the most trustworthy countries out there, right?
No.
Well, with that being said, let's
No.
take a quick break.
Okay.
Alex here with the Brother Side Podcast. After years of schooling Justin on the basketball court, my knees remind me every single day of the victory and the wear and tear. 4 knee surgeries to be exact. I recently started taking Able CBD tincture to help with my inflammation, and it's been more of an assist than Justin on the hardwoods. We were introduced to Able CBD through ultramarathoner Adam Monkey, who incorporates these American-made and tested products in his running routine. The Brother Side is super stoked to extend a discount if you're looking to try and manage pain, control inflammation, or need to sleep more naturally. Use the code BRO15, BRO15, to receive a 15% discount at checkout. Visit www.ablecbd.com. Once again, that's www.ablecbd.com. And we're back with the Brother Side podcast. We have Dr. John Hallgren here, and we're just discussing COVID and his experience with COVID. So what was that like being a doctor getting COVID?
It was great.
Felt
Really
so
good experience.
Yeah.
Really good experience.
best.
We enjoyed
Just
every
the
day.
best.
No, so my wife got it
Bring on the
first, and
COVID.
it was kind of weird. She got gastrointestinal symptoms first, and she didn't have any respiratory symptoms, didn't have any fever, it was just kind of upset stomach. So I didn't really attribute it to COVID, and she didn't either. And
Does she know how she got it, or did you guys figure it out?
she thinks she
Rotary
does. Rotary. No, Rotary's been pretty safe from
Yeah,
according
they
to
have
her.
been
So
very safe.
I don't think it was Rotary.
No.
She is teaching a course at Midlands University. She's teaching one of their MBA courses.
Okay.
And they had a Saturday, it was all day in person, and her class size is small, it's 10 or 12, and they were spread out, and she was 12 feet back from them, and so the classroom setup was we think COVID safe. But in the bathroom they were doing there were several classes going on, and they were doing LinkedIn headshots for whatever purpose, I guess. But
Yeah.
and so there are a lot of people crowded into the bathroom trying to look good for the pictures, and to the best of her knowledge, she thinks that's the most likely. And so we'd been out to eat at a restaurant the night before, but otherwise we had been staying inside,
Yeah.
Yeah.
doing all the socially distancing stuff. So probably that was the most likely place. But we also go to the grocery stores like everybody else. And
Sure.
and it's
Hard
so
to
prevalent
say.
in the community right now. So anyway,
Right.
it just goes to show that
It's something as innocent as taking
Yep.
some pictures and you
Yep.
know.
So she had a very mild case,
she didn't.
and you had a
So then
extreme
this
case?
was Wednesday Tuesday she got her initial symptoms. And then, so literally we talked on Friday and she's like, yeah, maybe I'm feeling a little better. I went off to work for clinic for the middle of the day. And by the time I got back, she said, I am sick as a dog. So like 4 hours, if
It
that.
totally changed for her.
And it was all respiratory, sore throat, fever, feeling crummy. And so I said, well, let's test you. So I tested her and sent it off. And so the next morning came back positive, and I'm like, great. And I was just in contact with her, and I've
Yeah.
just spent half a day in clinic with people.
Yeah.
So then I tested. Fortunately, my initial test was negative, so I didn't have symptoms or was shedding at the time. So we didn't have a big mess of patients and all that.
So you only
Right.
test positive when
Quarantine.
you're shedding.
Yes.
Yes. Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Now, whether shedding is clinically significant, well, let's leave that for another time.
Okay.
So then anyway, and so I still didn't have symptoms. Like, well, okay, but then you got to quarantine, and actually getting symptoms was kind of like a relief, because then I knew I wasn't going to be out for 3 weeks. Because if
Yeah.
you quarantine, your quarantine starts 2 weeks after your last contact with the person, and when the person is your wife, it's when her 10 days are up. So then your 14 days starts at the end of her 10 days. So it's it's almost an
long
entire
time.
month.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I got symptoms, and I tested, and I was positive. And so there were like 3 days where it was just misery. And I was telling Alex when we walked in that it's about all I could do to sit on the couch and look at the wall. I didn't even really want to watch TV for a short period of time. So
Really?
yeah,
Just
it was that
nauseous?
fatigue. No,
Or fatigue,
just muscle ache, fatigue. You're like, is it really worth it to get up? Because I'm not feeling bad.
gotta
But as soon as I
shift,
start
but-
moving, yeah.
Just extreme fatigue, like to your core, that
Yes.
sort of thing.
I mean, this is about as sick as I remember ever being. And it only lasted for a few days. And then the whole symptoms, probably about 7 days, and I was feeling mostly back to normal. But I still don't have my sense of smell back. So
So the big confusion for a lot of people
Yeah.
is so my wife had COVID.
Mm-hmm.
I did not, and I tested negative. How can that be? And there has to be a common denominator somewhere in some of these studies. They're doing study after
Mm-hmm.
study. There has to be something out there, right? There's been the theory of blood type.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, there's something hereditary.
yeah.
What are your thoughts on that?
So different people have different levels of how robust their immune system is. There are different patterns of transmission. So there was a study that I read back in the summer that showed the transmission rate between cohabitating spouses was only about 30%, which is amazing.
Yeah.
Wow.
Really just kind of amazing. And I know several of my friends have had COVID and their spouses didn't get it. And I've had several of my friends whose spouses did get it, and they both got it. So it's difficult to say. There is crossover in terms of your immune response, and so you may have had something recently, another coronavirus. So there's a few coronaviruses that float around that just cause garden variety colds. Until SARS, the original SARS back in the early 2000s, coronaviruses were just one of the hundreds of viruses that cause little colds.
Yep.
And so if you had one of those, maybe you still had some circulating coronavirus antibodies that were just enough to keep you from getting infected. There's different things, so you just never know.
It seems like you can't really pin it down to any one thing.
Yeah, you really can't.
There's just so many factors.
It's been a strangest disease. It has so many different presenting symptoms. Some people have really mild illness. Some people have really severe illness, and it's less predictable than even the flu, which is kind of notoriously has a wide variety of severities that people see. So,
do you worry that there could be another pandemic in the near future?
Well, near future. So this is our fourth, not necessarily pandemic, but we had SARS back in the early 2000s.
Yep.
We had the
H1N1?
H1N1 influenza. And then close on the heels of that, we had MERS. Do you all remember MERS?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So that was a coronavirus from camels in the Middle East. And it was very deadly. So fatality rates of 30-40% in some cases.
Wow.
So if that was as infectious as this, that would be catastrophic for humankind, really.
How did that one end?
Well, it hasn't completely ended. So interesting, one of my deployments in the Air Force was to Doha in Qatar. And it was in 2012, kind of as MERS was just starting to tail off. There never got to be huge numbers, probably because it killed so many people. But when I was deploying, that was the one thing that really kept me up at night. I wasn't worried about missiles from Iran. I was worried about MERS emerging in the 10,000 people that we were taking care of over in Doha.
Huh.
And so
was it not as you couldn't transmit it as easily, or like you?
Yeah, evidently, or possibly it was just so lethal that it didn't. It couldn't.
Like it put people down fast.
Right. You didn't have asymptomatic people walking around shedding.
Right.
You had people who were in hospital beds dying very quickly.
And I've heard, I don't know if this was on Rogan, I think it was, that the
all
best
good things come from Rogan.
Right. the best viruses don't kill their host right away, so that it
if the purpose of the virus is to propagate.
Right.
Killing your host too quick makes it tough to propagate.
So if it's too deadly,
Yeah.
the chances of it spreading quickly are slim to none.
But this is basically our fourth epidemic, and two of them have been pandemic level of novel respiratory viruses in the last 20 years. So,
Is it picking up steam? Like, is it happening more often, you think?
well, yes, because we really didn't recognize any pandemics since the Spanish flu back in 1918.
Right.
So we did have other flu pandemics, but nothing really novel like this. So it's.
What do you think?
So yes, we will see
Yeah.
future pandemics.
Yes.
Are they going to occur every 4 years from now on? I don't know.
Well,
every election year.
I feel like we're going to be
weird. No.
You see, like in China, they just like wear masks all the time.
Yep.
And I feel like we could go that direction.
I don't think people are socially going to accept that as a norm. I mean, the struggle right now for a mask is already extremely difficult for a lot of people.
It is.
And no one likes to do it, and we all do it because we have to, but I think if that was to go on for like everyday practice, you'd have a tough time getting people on board for that.
It depends. So, I think what you might see is we get so used to it that it just becomes routine when we go out to places like the grocery store, where you're going to be in unpredictable close contact with people. You got to jostle in line for the right tomato or the right avocado. You might see people say, well, it kind of makes sense. I'm just going to wear the mask when I do that kind of thing.
Right.
Even as we get the pandemic under control, or, when you're in, it'll almost start to be common sense that, okay, I'm going to be in this unpredictable area where I'm with a bunch of people, and I just throw on my mask while I'm in there. And again, the mask really doesn't protect the wearer if you're wearing just the basic cloth mask that everybody just hooks over their ears.
Right.
That's protecting your fellow person. So maybe we'll kind of start thinking about our fellow man more than than we have been.
Sure. Do you think there's any validity to like an over practice of hygiene? So I say this because in my previous life, I was in a dirty environment in the landscape world all the time. I mean, everything from dirt to grease to chemicals, and over time I felt, and this is my own opinion, that I built some kind of tolerance and immunity because in 16 years of running that business, I never sat out because of sickness. I also never get vaccinated for the flu. So I think my body has been able to acclimate and adapt, and maybe that's why I fared better than most people, or that maybe I didn't get COVID for reasons like that.
Well, so there is something to that. I mean, classically, when we study kids who are in a farm environment or where they're outdoors and in the muck and the mud more often, they do tend to get less illness. They do tend to get less asthma, say. And it's probably because they get a constant challenge to their immune system, and they have a more robust immune system that can respond to more things. I think that's true. I don't think it's true. We've researched it and know it to be true.
Well, and I just think, with all the hand sanitizer and hand soap, but yes, you need, after you go to the bathroom, yes, you need to wash your hands, but is it necessary to be using hand sanitizer every door you walk into, or is that going to at some point become a disadvantage to your immune system? That's a
right.
Is that a theory? Is that
well, I think short term it makes sense, like as we're going through this pandemic, but maybe long term, like there's something to be said for not doing that all the time, right?
Yeah, it's a balance. I mean, so if you're hand sanitizing all the time, so you're not going to wipe your nose and maybe get a small dose of whatever flu is going around, so you don't get really very sick, and but your body mounts an immune response. But if it prevents you from dying from a novel respiratory virus, it's probably worth it. So it is. It's a tough balance. I mean, I think right now it's obvious, just like you said, this is clearly worse than the regular flu.
Right.
It makes sense to protect ourselves as much as we can while we get this under control with vaccines. But as we do get it under control, hopefully, or if we keep doing 200,000 new cases a day, this might be the first respiratory virus where we get natural herd immunity. But even with our current case rates, I don't think that's a significant likelihood.
I was telling Alex, I was watching the Governor Ricketts Zoom press conference today, and they were talking about, one of the doctors was talking about herd immunity and what numbers Nebraska would have to get to in order to have herd immunity, which is like the 70%-ish population getting it.
It's a guess, but yeah.
Yeah, and he made it clear that it was like an estimation.
Yeah.
But he said it was like 1.4 million people would have to get it in Nebraska, and that would basically equate to, and he used the 0.5% death rate, and that was 7,000 people. And I'm like, 7,000, that's a lot of people. I mean, when you start talking like that, especially in a more densely populated area, you might know someone that knows somebody that died from corona, based on that kind of number.
Yeah, so I think natural herd immunity would be the worst way to get there. Really the concept of herd immunity is related to vaccines. So we've eliminated smallpox. We've almost eliminated polio. We can probably eliminate measles if we can get everybody to get their measles shot.
Right, right.
So when we talk about herd immunity, we're really talking about induced herd immunity by using vaccines. I don't, smallpox was around until we had vaccines, and that was a disease that killed people pretty quickly. So, natural herd immunity is only so effective, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it
and
does.
It's a lousy way to get there because, just like you said, a lot of people are going to have to die to get there.
Yeah, there's a lot of suffering, and the thing is,
rather not do that.
To me, that's 7,000 people dying, but that doesn't account for all the people that get super sick but don't die.
Right. Yeah.
There's also a big number there too.
Yeah, there's a lot of weird stuff. I mean, there's what have come to become long haulers, where people just get severe fatigue. That fatigue that I experienced that goes on for weeks and months, and some people hadn't really even gone away. Sometimes loss of sense of smell is permanent, and that's it's not a huge disability, but it's definitely not so great.
Yeah, I want to smell stuff.
Right, exactly.
Like
Certain things you don't.
Like
something small that you might take for granted, but yeah, like I don't want that to be a forever thing.
You wouldn't miss any farts, right?
No, well, no, I would in a way.
Your own.
My own, yeah.
One of the interesting things about the whole pandemic is that I thought this might be a wake-up call to people taking care of themselves better.
Okay. In what way?
Because it's been stated that obese people are going to struggle with this more than someone who's not. Smokers are going to struggle with this, but people continue to live their same lifestyles and don't change despite the facts. You know what I mean?
Yep.
It's interesting that nobody's changing their ways, and I thought, with people dying, people in the hospital, that maybe I should lose some weight, maybe I should quit smoking. What are some of the other
risk factors
that we
really any cardiovascular disease, hypertension, heart failure, coronary artery disease, anything like that. Diabetes is a big one because that suppresses your immune system. And then I haven't seen any. So there's some weird thing that goes on with clotting in some people, and I think that probably may be unmasking some underlying small clotting disorders. So that research is still underway. But so there's lots of little things like that. You can't do anything about clotting disorders, but you can quit smoking. You can control your diabetes. You can lose some weight.
Right. How do you feel about vitamin D and zinc? Those have been big.
So if you're already normal, if you already have normal levels, they're probably not going to help you. So the research is out there for vitamin D specifically tells us that people who are low on vitamin D probably have a pretty good chance of doing worse with COVID, but people who had normal levels going into it probably didn't help.
Like extra supplementing, you're saying?
Yes.
Yeah.
So like if you're taking super maximal doses of vitamin D, that's probably not going to help unless you were deficient beforehand.
Yeah.
And you don't need to take super doses, you just need to take normal repletion doses.
Right.
And then zinc can inhibit the way the virus replicates. Again, there's not really any clear data that says, hey, if you max up on zinc, you're not going to get COVID.
It's just too early to know that sort of data.
Yeah, I mean, we have a lot of in vitro data, but not a lot of good, hey, I'm going to give you zinc and you don't get COVID if a population gets it does show in vitro that it helps prevent virus, multiplying. But and zinc is pretty harmless. So
yeah.
One of the things that I thought about was, do you think, since it's respiratory and people are getting anxious about, getting COVID, do you think when people get anxiety that amps COVID up? You know what I mean? As far as having breathing issues?
Not physiologically.
Okay.
So, but people, if you have anxiety, I mean, one of the cardinal symptoms of anxiety is just feeling like you can't get a deep breath in, you can't breathe, panic
we go on a lot of those calls.
I bet.
Yeah.
So when people have panic attacks, they look for the world like they're having a heart attack or in respiratory failure, but they're not.
Yeah.
So somebody who's anxious may feel the irritation in their lungs more, because they're just very attentive to what's going on. And if they feel some tightness or anything like that, they can make they feel worse, even though physiologically they're not oxygenating any actually worse than if they didn't have it. So
I just kind of thought, like someone who is anxious that gets COVID, it's like, oh my gosh, now I have COVID, and it exacerbates the problem.
Yeah. Yeah, so their experience with COVID would be worse.
Okay.
But
or
it's
better,
all mental.
depending on
It's all mental, yeah.
Yeah. So physiologically, not worse.
They're not
mentally.
They're not in more danger of dying or going on a ventilator or that kind of thing. But like you said, the experience and life is an experience. So
It
COVID,
sure is.
COVID could be worse for people with anxiety.
We're gonna switch off. We're running out of time. We got about 10 minutes here. We'll get off COVID for now. Elizabeth, your wife, told me that there was a time you got tossed out of a bar, a Mexican bar.
You're gonna have to be more specific.
A Mexican
It just
bar.
happens so much.
A Mexican bar, cartoon style, like someone
Yes.
literally tossed you out of a bar.
Yeah, that was a pretty good story. So this was spring break in college, and we went down to Ensenada, Mexico, with a good friend of mine from high school, whose brother's a career firefighter in Phoenix. And
Good department.
He's the one who actually got me thrown out of the bar.
Okay.
So not
What
intentionally.
a dick.
Maki's not a bad guy. Anyway, we're just at a club, and I'd met this French girl, and I was successful in getting a phone number and setting up a meeting time for the next day. And then
Meeting time. That's
she
what
left.
they call it.
She left with her friends, so we were still just hanging out at the bar and doing stuff. And I guess somebody was making a ruckus, and he had an X on the back of his sweatshirt. So Maki, my friend, was making the X to describe the guy's sweatshirt. Only he was pointing, and it looked like he was pointing at me. And it's a loud club, and the bouncers just really wanted somebody to throw out of the bar. So he was pointing at me as far as they were concerned. So they just grabbed me, carried not fireman carry. That was a 2-man carry.
Yeah.
So not over the shoulder, but threw me out and just did the old 1, 2, 3, and just threw
No
me
way.
threw me in the street on the curb.
Into the gutter.
How
Well,
demoralizing.
so I picked myself up and kind of brushed myself off, and I stand up, and I'm literally face to face with this girl I'd gotten her phone number off. I said, can I still call you tomorrow? And she's like, sure.
Really?
Yep.
Yeah.
Didn't lose your game, huh?
No. And the evening went on from there. So we went back to the hotel. Maki and Jim, my friends, got in a big fight, threw a beer can, knocked a hole in the wall. The cops came to the hotel room, hauled us down to the,
You sound like guys we'd like to party.
Oh, yeah.
threatened to arrest us. I was a much better Spanish speaker back then than I am now, and I managed to talk our way out of getting arrested.
Yeah.
So, but we went to the hardware store and got some spackle and
Fixed it?
Fixed the wall.
Wow.
Painted the wall. I matched the paint. I was amazed at how well we matched the paint. So
Wow. That's a classic spring break story.
it is a pretty cool.
Yeah.
I'm kind of proud of that one actually.
Yeah,
Because
I
at
was-
the Air Force Academy, you don't always get to do that kind of stuff.
Right.
So I was glad I.
Just getting
got the
away and like,
experience.
having those wild weekends, pretty
Yeah.
rare.
Yeah, it was just tougher,
Yeah.
and yeah, it was tougher to do.
Yeah, Alex has got some pretty good spring break stories too.
Yeah. We had a run-in with the Mexican Popo.
Which town?
That would have been Cancun.
Oh yeah.
Yep. They had two buddies. There's a lagoon close to Senior Frogs.
Mm-hmm.
And two buddies, I mean, I don't even know what time it was. It had to be 11, 12 o'clock at night. I mean,
Sure.
kind of when things were really getting out of hand.
Right.
They were like, yeah, we're going to go piss down in this lagoon. I'm like, maybe we shouldn't do that. We can see Senior Frogs. And they're like, no, I can't hold it. They go down there. Nobody in sight. It's like, okay, this whatever. All of a sudden, out of nowhere, these cops come flying over the median. They have machine guns. And I'm like, oh boy, this is not good. And they want to do, they shot their flashlight down into the lagoon, saw both the guys peeing. I'm like, well, this is obvious. Something's going to happen here. And they're like, we're taking you to jail. And I told the guy, I said, I just pull out $100. I don't know why I did it. That's all I could think of. I pull out $100 and I say, you take this and we'll call it good. And he looked at it. He held it in the flashlight. He said, okay. And then they just drove off. I'm like, oh my Lord. I was
Brilliant
so
move on your
nervous.
part. That was the best $100 you ever spent.
Yeah, it was. I'm like, whoa, we were all just like, what happened?
That
arresting
actually
us
worked.
over peeing in a lagoon. Whatever. But yeah, I mean, that's one of many stories.
It's a good one.
Yeah.
Yeah. And we got a story about your brother always calling CPS on you. Is that right?
Yeah. We, you guys are brothers, so you fought. So we
A
would,
couple times.
Yeah, we fought a lot.
yeah. So he was younger, so he got the worst of it.
Yeah.
And so if we had a fight, not often, but probably 3 or 4 times, he would literally pick up the phone, call the Child Protective Service hotline, say, my brother's beating me. And I would rip the phone out of his hand. I would just say, everything's fine. I would hang up the phone.
Did they ever show up?
That's the amazing thing. Well, I mean, the phone call probably lasted less than you could trace it. And
Sure.
they didn't know who. But no, it never came to anything after that.
Huh.
How old were you?
This was just as I was kind of entering 12, 13-year-old. So I was
Okay.
entering puberty, and he was still younger.
How much older are you than him?
Just 2 years.
Okay.
So it was tight. So I had to take advantage of my window of,
Yeah.
clear physical superiority.
Right. Yeah, I had clear physical superiority until we were adults, basically, because I'm 4 years older than Alex.
yeah.
So That was enough.
Are you submitting and admitting that
We're now
you don't,
even.
that we're even?
We're now
Okay.
even.
All right.
But growing up, he was just too young. You know, you couldn't.
Right.
It just.
Yeah, then it looks bad if you beat up on him too bad.
Well, yeah.
I don't
it
think
just,
he cared.
It wasn't a challenge. It wasn't a challenge. It's not your fault.
Yeah,
that you're
no.
such a pansy.
I'm better for it these days.
Yeah. Look how I molded you. You're
Yeah.
welcome.
You're welcome. Yeah,
welcome.
it was all you.
I remember a time we were talking about kicking out. Do you remember it was New Year's Eve, I got kicked out of Draft House before it was The Good Life.
Okay.
No.
You remember, were you there for that night?
I don't think so.
I got kicked out of Draft House, and I was right next door to Lit Lounge.
Yeah.
So we stumble over to Lit Lounge, and the cop just looked at me, said, "Nah, you ain't getting in here." So I went in the other door of Draft House and got back in and got re-thrown out. Different guy, re-thrown out. So I've been there. I've been kicked out a couple times.
We just have that look when we're drunk because I had that same thing at a casino in Council Bluffs. I was just walking up and he goes, "Nope." I'm like, I thought I looked like this, where I was like, "What?"
I'm put together.
What? Yeah.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
It's terrible.
Yeah.
So John, we got a minute left here.
Yep.
What's your biggest piece of advice in regards to COVID as we enter winter?
Do the things you've always, or hopefully you've already been doing. Wear your mask when you're out to help your fellow man. Maybe the mask helped you a little bit, so it might help you out a little bit too. Do the social distancing thing. As far as get-togethers and stuff, just be thoughtful about who you're associating with. If it's a big party, don't go. If it's family members you trust and they won't show up if they're sick and that, and there's still going to be some level of risk we're going to want to take because it sucks to just hang out in your house with nobody else around too. So.
Yeah.
So
you think there
thanks-
should? Oh, go ahead.
So Thanksgiving's on.
Depends on how you're planning to do Thanksgiving.
Yeah.
So yeah, if you're having some trusted family members over, there's just a couple of households, 3 households maybe, depending on your level of comfort with folks, that's fine. But if you're going to have 100 people over,
Probably
shoot for-
should.
Probably.
That's a super spreader.
Do you think there should be a mask mandate
Um,
in the state, like statewide?
So this is where my slight libertarian bent comes in, and I think I think mask mandates ought to come from elected officials.
Right.
So I'll put it that way. And I think I actually admire what Governor Ricketts has done, and finally just saying, okay, I think he got kind of wound up in letter of the law, you can't do this, and finally just saying, okay, cities, this is your
Do your thing.
big thing, you figure it out, and I will support you, which I think was great, because that doesn't mean that Alliance has to do the same thing that Omaha does.
Sure. Yeah.
So, but yeah, I think I do think masks help, and I hope people will wear them when you're out in public and in situations where you're going to be within 10 feet or so. I know the thing is 6, but 10 is probably even a little bit better. Unpredictable, people you don't know, you
Yeah.
definitely ought to be wearing your mask. So.
We appreciate you, man.
Yeah,
Thanks for coming on.
this was really
John.
fun. Like I said, it's my second
Yeah.
podcast, and the other one was great, but this one was a lot more fun.
Awesome.
We didn't
Well,
even talk
good to
about
hear.
our drinks. Coors. We went with
We got
Coors.
Coors today. Yeah,
Yeah.
no. Thanks again, John.
Thank you
We
guys.
appreciate
Really appreciate it. It
And
was fun.
happy holidays to
Yeah,
you.
happy holidays to you all too.
Yep.
Great.
Thanks, man.
Thanks.
Thanks.